They don't get it. They forget. I think he froze.
Did I? No, I'm hopefully not. No, I'm just
You're just boring him to death.
Yeah.
No, no.
Let's let Jesse talk.
Yeah.
No, I'm getting some insight and I'm just listening intently. I'm sorry. I might have a stoic impression, but it's because I'm listening intently.
And it works for everybody.
Validation.
It's not for everybody. You push them in. You want to be.
Get your space, Kate. Make sure you're well centered, whether Bill is or not. Okay.
Thank you. You notice how he always pushes me out on the Tuesday meeting, right? We just have to get a love seat office chair.
Oh, put my.
Oh, there you go. That'd be interesting.
But I just move you up.
Yeah, I don't care.
All right. Now you got it. You can learn from other people and what they say.
I will say this, when it comes to the layout, I'm going to have a conversation with y'all, and I want to hear both y'all's stories. I will wrap us up with some what I think are fun rapid-fire questions. So you got that to look forward to.
Oh, yeah, look forward to. Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's video, I'm going to be sitting down with my friends Bill and Kate. I've met Bill and Kate through the professional setting of the infinite banking concept. We're part of the same mastermind group where we get to talk about our experiences helping clients, guiding prospects, the whole gamut. And they were kind enough to sit down with me today to share their origin story with the infinite banking concept. So I hope that you enjoy. All right, guys. Well, we've already been chatting it up, but I want to say good afternoon to you because we're both on East Coast time, so it's good afternoon for all of us. How are you today?
We're doing great. I'm doing great.
Fantastic. Well, I'm happy to have you all here, and happy again. This is so neat. This is always so neat. I think you're so brave, Kate. Again, at least Bill and I had one-on-one phone call conversation before he said, yeah, I'll jump down and sit with you and we'll record and talk through IBC. And but you and I didn't have that benefit. So we're used to seeing each other on the screen, y'all from Florida, me in North Carolina. But today we're going to be talking about your story. So yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for being willing to hit record on the conversation. Maybe we'll do ladies first. I don't know. Y'all just tell me, where do you want to pick up with, what did life look like when you were exposed to the infinite banking concept, and how were you exposed to the infinite banking concept?
Oh, I could do that easy. Thank you. And thank you very much for inviting us. We really appreciate it. I had no idea. It all started for me when I met Bill, and I didn't even know what he did for work, for anything. So we went to a Christmas party. We were only a second date or so. And it was a Christmas party. He walked away, and I was listening to a bunch of people talking at the table because it was from a real estate investors group that he went to. And they were all talking, and they happened to be his clients. And I had no idea what they were talking about, but what they were talking about, how to use the policy, how you use your money over again, how you can borrow, pay it back, and all of that. And I just thought, that's really neat. That sounded good. And I was in a position at that time that I was just selling a manufactured home I had. I was already in the house that I'm in now. But I thought, well, once I sell that, I'm going to put the money in the bank, and then I'm going to go ahead and just pay off my mortgage on this house. And then at least I won't have a mortgage. But then after hearing Bill's clients, I thought, that's interesting. So we're driving home, and I look at him and I said, I don't want to do what I was going to do. I want to do what you do. And he just looked at me because it was so cryptic. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, I want to, so I could keep my money, because I didn't know how to even explain it or say it or what it was called or that it even had a name. I mean, I had no idea. So, but it's changed my life from the dreaded words in my life of I can't afford it to every time either my sisters or anybody asking me to do things, just on a tight budget, because I'm also a flight attendant and we don't make a ton of money. It's a misconception. And everything was, I just can't afford it. And now, way fast forwarding. I am now in the process that I'm going to be loaning one of my daughters and son-in-law a pretty good sized chunk of money to pay off one of their cars. So it's definitely changed my life.
Well, tell me how long have you been a flight attendant?
I've been a flight attendant for 30 years. So I started when I was 5. But
I was not prepared to do any math there, Kate. There was no follow-up question there about math.
I've been flying for 30 years.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So let me dig deeper right there on can you remember anything that you overheard Bill and everybody talking about that exactly pricked you to say, oh, that sounds good. What sounded good? Can you remember anything? I don't know what aspect of how he was saying things or describing things that provoked that curiosity in you.
He didn't say anything to me. I had no idea what he did. It was the clients sitting at the table and they were talking. And the one woman who has a policy, Olga, she was talking about her mother and how she wanted to get one for her because it was so good because she could put the money in here and then she could borrow against it. And the money was, it's just the way they were saying how it was still going to be there and they could just pay it back and keep using it over, and how it helped her to get out of debt. She had a lot, I guess, some debt. I don't know how much, but she had some things that she was trying to get out of, and it had really been helping her. So she said she wanted to get her, I don't know if she had kids or not, but it was another relative in the family involved in it because it was working so well. And I always thought you had to be wealthy to get whole life insurance. I didn't think, in fact, that was one of the things I said to Bill on the drive home was, well, I don't have a lot of money, so I don't know if I can really even do this. But, as a matter of fact, I could, and I did. So they just talked about how they used their money over, and that intrigued me.
Okay. I see so many things that I'm further curious about. I love it. That's so neat. All right. You're hearing something that inspires you. You want to do it. And then at the same time, you dealt with a misconception that we now help people through, which is, well, that does sound amazing. And they're excited about it. And they want their friends and family members to do it. So it's obviously good for everybody. But can I? And once you hear that it's whole life insurance, is that going to be prohibitive for me? And do I have enough money to do that? So neat. We could have a conversation there. So I guess let me pause. Or I don't know. What were then beyond do I have enough to get started? What were any other sticking points, maybe, Kate, that you were either having to work through or get answers for? What resources did you turn to? What did it look like for you to get enough good answers to your good questions for you to decide, I'm implementing this?
I really just talked to Bill about it. But one of my other big concerns was the premium. Because like I said, as a flight attendant, when I looked at what my premium was going to be, and what I earned as a flight attendant, just as a base, there's ways to augment it, but still you can't count on that. It was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to afford it? So now I knew I could do it. I had the money and I could do it at least the first year because I had the sale of the house and I had that, the house was paid for. I didn't have a mortgage on it. So whatever I sold it for was just coming back to me. And so now I knew I could do it the first year. But then when I saw what the premium was, I was like, whoa, how am I going to do this? It was like everybody else, like a lot, I won't say everybody, but like a lot of people we talk to, and it's scary. But then Bill explained to me the different ways that we could handle it for paying for it, that I didn't have to pay the second year annually if I didn't want to. I had options. I could do 6 months. I could do 1 month at a time. I could borrow from my cash value. I could, so there were a lot of things. I went, oh, okay. I don't know why I wasn't scared because I really wanted to do this. It kind of took my breath away like I said, when I looked at the premium and it was like, oh, what am I going to do? But then once he explained it, I thought, okay, I have great faith in God and I know he's going to watch over me. And I just felt like, let's go for it. Let's do it. And now I'm in my third year and I've done them all annually and maxed my PUA to the point where now I'm looking for another policy.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, if I use the expression, Bill will have heard this as well, just because we've talked about, we both enjoy listening to James Nethery's podcast, Banking with Life podcast, and he'll use the description that, well, if you don't raise your eyebrows some at the premium, it might not be significant enough for your life to actually move you towards your goals. So, and I've adopted that. I like that. Even the facial expression that you just gave a second ago, as you're describing, what it looked like to consider. Okay, year 2 is going to come around. How's that going to look? And that's just when you know that it's serious. If it'll make you raise your eyebrows some, we're at least probably talking about serious numbers, which obviously it was for you. Okay, so cool. So you had a resource in Bill. So, Bill, let's get your origin story then, because she's turning to you, for insights about this thing that she's overhearing on a second date, which is just hilarious and awesome. So, why don't you give your origin story?
Well, let me just add one final step to what she said. What we did with her, we did a 2-pay because she had money in hand. She was going to make 2 payments. As you know, life insurance needs to be paid for 7 years. Otherwise, it'll make. So how are we going to make those payments? So one of the gentlemen I spoke to that I worked with, they always would make the next 5 payments from the cash value of the policy.
Okay.
So that's what I showed her initially and didn't have a problem with it. She would have had her mortgage paid off. She would have had $89,000 roughly in cash, and she would have had a lien against it because she would have borrowed money. And she would have had a death benefit, even though everybody says, can I do this without the death benefit? So that was the initial thing. But what I always do, and I've learned, I used to tell them, I'm not trying to upsell you, but let me show you if you made those payments years 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, in her case, what the difference is. So I showed her, and she would have over 100,000 more in cash value than she was looking at. Every time I do that with people, they all say, I want that one. Because I use the term greed, but it's really not greed. It's just, if you have a choice, do you want 89,000 or 193,000? Everyone wants 193. But I've come to learn in a few minutes, they look at the column, and her question was, how am I going to make the premium payment in year 3? And I gave her the options, and that was good. But the addendum that I wanted to say to you is, we were just at think tank. The second day, we were in the back of the room standing up. We got up and we were standing up. And somebody, I forget who was talking. And she said to me, the woman who said to her daughters all the time, honey, we can't afford that. She said, how did I get in the position I'm in? Where she thought she was going to make a 2-pay because she had the money. Now she's made 3. And now she says, well, I'm going to have more money. I need another policy. So it just happens. You need certain things because a lot of people can't succeed at this. because they just don't have discipline to move forward. But my story was I was in business my whole life. I was in sales. I sold. I had a great partner who taught me everything about selling. And at one point, when I was new, I said he wanted to be partners. I said, Steve, his name was Steve, 50-50, it doesn't, you know everything. I really don't. I'm still learning. He said, don't worry. I'll get it back down the road. So he taught me. I learned how to sell through him. We ended up leaving one company that sold fragrances and health and beauty aids. We went to another company to start a fragrance business. It was like 30 something years ago. And in that business, that's where he kind of got paid back. Because my partner was a maven in the fragrance business. He was a wheeler dealer, but somebody had to handle the 50 or 60 people that worked there. And it fell on me, and I was a numbers guy. He would come in and tell me these great deals. And I regret some of the things I used to say. Came in one day, I said, Bill, I just did this deal. And I go, Steve, how much did we make? Because he bought $1 million worth of goods. He sold it. And how much did we make? So, I don't know. And he told me he made this number, and I figured it out. And he did. He made like 20%. I said, no, and I figured it out real quick. I go, no, really only made 14. And he got depressed. But if you know anything about math, he made it in 1 month. So do the math, just multiply it by 12. What did he really make? He made like, 150%, So I learned from him. Then eventually we went our own way. The company got sold. Unfortunately, we didn't make a good deal for us then. We came down to Florida. We worked for another company. I ended up leaving. I started my own business, and it was going along, doing pretty good. Then I had a problem in that business. Had to close it. Had to file bankruptcy in that business to get out. And I started a business online, and I started doing pretty well in that. And my health insurance agent would come to my house, because luckily for me, I never went to doctors. Whenever I went and I got a bill, I get ticked off, and I call him, John, come over here, change my insurance. He came one day and he started telling me about a program to eliminate debt. And he wouldn't tell me, the goal was not, don't tell the client or the potential client that it's life insurance. So he wouldn't tell me, and there was a 10-step program. When he got to 7, I go, John, this is life insurance. He like hemmed and hawed. So I kept it up, and he like, yeah, it is life insurance. But because I had known about it, because and how foolishly I had a policy back in the early 80s. And, like everyone, I let it go. And I should have never done it. So all of a sudden, as I got into this business, I said, this is going to be great. I'll learn this, and I can ease out of the online businesses I had. But God had different plans, because my whole life I was always, I did pretty well. So you get a big head. Well, he wanted my attention for some reason. And he decided to shut off the income from the other businesses. And somehow I had to survive. And you hear Mary Jo talk about her first 5 years, and she made no money. So I still wanted to do this, and I still tried to run the online businesses. I drove Uber. I did a bunch of things, but each month that went by, I learned more about it. I learned more about how to do it. And then eventually it started to pick up. And then at one point, as I read the book more and more, I had another woman that was working with me at the time, and another gentleman that I would help him with deals. They both told me at the time, Bill, you're already doing infinite banking. Why don't you just become a practitioner? And Yeah, I listened. And then finally one day, I didn't tell anybody because they were the only two that really knew. I went and applied for the program. And since I had read the books, because there's a bunch of books you got to read. Well, I had read this once when I first started like 6 times. Now I've read it probably 20. And there's another book, The Case for IBC. I had read several times. Um, Privatized Banking. I had read that twice. They were shocked when I told them I read it twice. They're like, "What?" So they say, "Oh, you don't need a practice. You don't need a mentor." I took the program. I was going to take the test in like a week. And the woman that worked with me said, "Bill, you like to study. You like to learn things. Why are you rushing? Why don't you just wait?" So I did. I slowed down and I really studied the book for about a month. Then after a month, I stopped. I put the book aside for a week, and then I did what we all did in college. I crammed. And I went through the book one last time. And I remember speaking to David, and I was concerned about passing the test. You had to get an 80. He said, "Bill, don't worry, you're going to pass." I guess they know by what you say. "Don't worry, you're going to pass." And he said, he said, nobody ever got 100, and you're not going to be the first. That was a mistake because then I really was wanted to get 100. So I ended up getting 96 because there were two questions on the test. They both required the same answer, but I didn't know what it was. So one I picked this answer and one I picked the other. So I knew I couldn't get it. But he always used to say early on, he'd say, "Oh yeah, you're the guy that got the high score." Um, but I wish I had known this. We all say it earlier because those businesses that I still have one. It doesn't really do anything because I don't work at it, but they would have survived just by being my own banker and not like we all do. Use credit cards, use lines of credit from banks. And when you can't pay those things, the heat gets turned up. So when I did get my policy, I was still going through those things. As a matter of fact, I got the policy because I figured the commission I would earn on my own policy, I could pay the premium for the first year. And then I could use my Social Security to make the premium payments. And I'll just tell you, for years, that was the only thing that made me survive. I would put the money in, and a week or two later, whatever I could, I took out. And eventually things get better, and all of a sudden it's paid, and you start looking for more. But like everyone, why didn't I? When the guy that sold it to me in 1983, or it's about when he sold it, he was my college professor actually, and he get out of college, he ended up moving to Colorado, and before he left, he sold me a whole life policy. He didn't know how to explain infinite banking because Nelson was learning it at that point. So, like everyone, it became a bill. And I let it go. And I to this day, I kick myself. And I always tell David, when Nelson did this, he had no small army that he has now. And David told me on 2 occasions, Nelson had like 40 people coming to a seminar. And he called them up, 40 of them, 30 of them told him they were coming. And he said, not one showed. And he said, after the second time it happened, he said, "Nelson, why are you doing this?" So how do you take that moment to where we are today when the only guy with you, your son-in-law, is saying what anyone would have said? Like, you're crazy, because he discovered it. he had to have such a belief in what he had found that he soldiered on alone. Probably no bullets in the gun either at times, hand to hand combat. And to look down back at a guy like me who's, I'm in my 70s, I love when people say to me, "Oh, but I'm 60 years old. Can I get a policy?" I'm trying to get 3 at 73 years old, so too late smart. My dad used to have a term. He never called us dumb, but he used to say, "Fella, when are you going to grow a brain?" It just took me a long time to grow a brain, but here we are. But meeting her, along with other things, she discovered, and I would love to talk to Nelson right now to tell him what actually she taught me, and now we teach to our clients. Because we hear it all the time. We hear it on our mastermind. I heard it one day. Somebody was asked, "What should I take a loan for? Should it be for a car?" One of them was, my son has he's going, should I pay for his education? Should I go on a trip? Should I do this or that? And she whispers in my ear when we're there, "How about everything?" So I use the example of, she bought a banana at Walmart one day for 17 cents, totally financed with her banking policy.
Everything else.
She does not spend. When I say she will not spend a dime, and it totally makes sense. And we told another agent, he actually interviewed you. And at the time, I didn't really understand what she had discovered really on her own through her own necessity. Go ahead, you want to say something?
Well, just because I forgot about the two-pay, the way I did it, that I had the first 2 years covered because of the money from that house. And the third year was the one that was going to be the problem. But now the first 2 years, I couldn't do it like everybody was talking about, how you would borrow, collateralize, borrow against it, and pay yourself back with interest, because I didn't have any room. My PUA was maxed out. So now I had, so I just kind of had to sit and wait. And then finally I thought, well, this is silly. So I started borrowing money, just putting everything on my credit cards that I possibly could. And whatever I couldn't, I just put it on the list and get it all together. I borrow a chunk of money and a little extra. So that way, if I want to pay cash for the banana, I can, because it's gone through my policy. And a little extra, because you always need a little, you always need to have a little cash on hand. And then I would pay all my bills, never carry a balance on a credit card, pay all the bills. I didn't before anyhow, but now I really don't. And I do it that way. And then all my money that comes in, I pay my loan. And that's pretty much how I did it, because it was the only way I could use the policy while I was sitting and waiting for the next year to come around, when I didn't have all the money to put into my PUA. But then here I am again. My third year was like October, and I think by January, I had maxed out my PUA again. So, it's just, which is not a bad thing. It's a great thing. But, that's how I did it. Just I didn't want to sit around and wait till I could borrow and pay myself interest.
I love it. I love talking about IBC in the context of lifestyle. It doesn't have to always be, because it's the infinite banking concept. It could be in a business context. It could be in an investing context. So there's this ebb and flow of money, and people always show up with a lifestyle. So just use infinite banking for whatever it is that you're already doing. And I think people can overlook where Nelson talks about in the book about appliances. Like he doesn't, he's got a college example. Yeah, he's got, tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of business equipment examples, but he also talks about a refrigerator He also talks about our washing machine. He talks about appliances, just normal stuff, normal stuff. Bill, you seem like you had something else you wanted to say right there. I'll say too, though, just for anybody who's hearing David's name for the first time, when you were talking about David earlier, that's David Stearns, Nelson's son-in-law, just in case this is somebody's first time hearing anything about infinite banking.
Yeah, well, yeah, and with David, I would call like as I did, and I really didn't know who David was. A lot of them say they would call and Nelson would pick up. Well, when I called, David always picked up, and I'd order the books, and you'd chat a little bit, and so he knew me, but he didn't know me. And 2 years ago, I guess it was, we were in Las Vegas at Think Tank, and we were leaving, and he had said it to me several times. But he made a statement, me being old, that changed the course of my life. He just said it for the umpteenth time, and it just hit me. He said, Bill, you need to get away from those guys. They're holding you back. And we came home, and I remember telling Kate, you know what he said? We came home. We were home for about 25 hours. We had to get on a plane and go to another insurance event, which was with the group that I was with. And then it was like right in my face, like right here. And a couple of things transpired there that made me realize what he told me I had to do. We had to do. And that's what we did. And it's made all the difference meeting Bruce and Mary Jo, not just a face on a computer screen. And everyone does it different, but we all do it the same. They have a different, they might be way out here.
Yes.
But they're trying to get them here. And somebody's way out here and they're trying to get them here. And it gave me the confidence to know that what I had literally, I learned it on my own, but I learned it from a lot of people. But I didn't have practitioners I could call. If I need to call, like Bruce, we have a big case we're working on. I call Bruce and asked him, and he said to me when we were talking, it hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen. It's a guy we go to church with. And Bruce said, I've never done one like this either. But in the past, I didn't really have anyone to ask. Now you've got all these people that, what do we have? 300, we have 304 right now. And if you call any one of them, they'll pick up the phone or they'll schedule a time and you can have a conversation with them. And if you've been in the life insurance business anytime, usually if you want anything, oh, you want this pen? They want to get paid, not here. They generally want to help. And it's helped me, it's benefited me a lot.
When you were talking about appliances, just a quick little story. My air conditioner last May went, and I had to get a new one to the tune of $7,000. So I went ahead and I remember walking right around the front of the house and the guy's talking to me. And I mean, I know I have to get it. And I said, well, I'll put it on a credit card. And he said, well, if you pay cash, he says, there's a 3% service fee. And so I'm like, okay, so $210. All right, I can do that. And he said, but if you pay cash, you don't have to pay that 3%. And my head's going, it's like, yeah, but then I lose $7,000 and I gain 210. And that ratio just didn't work for me. So I said, that's okay, I know. I'll put it on the credit card. And he just looked at me like, well, okay, well, if you do it today, I'll waive the fee. So he ended up waiving the 3% anyhow. I guess he just wanted the, for the commission or the sale, whatever. I don't know. But he says, but if you do it today, if you put it on the card today, I'll waive the fee. And I went, okay, works for me. I mean, it had to be today, that day or the next day. What did I care? So I did that. And it was, and people forget. A client of ours had an air conditioning issue also. She said it was like $22,000. We got this policy through in the nick of time. She was going to have everything set. She says, oh, I already paid them. They gave me $1,000 off if I paid them cash. And I just like crumbled because I was like, oh my gosh, that's $21,000 gone. You'll never see again just to save one. But that's how we're all 1,000. But that's how we're all conditioned. It's that. So you have to remind yourself. It's like, no, I'll do it the other way. It's okay.
So let's take a moment and talk through that if we can, Kate, because again, some people, this might be the first time they hear from you, hear about this whole idea of, well, okay, I know that I could use a credit card for things or some form of credit. That's one way to finance. I know that I can use cash for things. That's another way to finance. But Kate and Bill and people that they know are talking about something different, talking about something that's not just credit, not just cash. Well, let's take a minute and talk about that thing, because when you're talking about losing $7,000 or losing $21,000, we're not saying that you won't still pay for the same product or service that you're buying when you buy things. But instead of asking somebody permission on their terms and conditions, if they qualify you while you provide them collateral, etc., or simply taking your hard-earned money and spending it that one time, you're obviously saying, well, there's another way. So just say anything right there about this way of using infinite banking and how it's different or superior to cash or credit.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I know. Sorry. I said a lot and then I wrapped it up with a 2-second or 1-second question right there. What about infinite banking makes it superior? How is it that you're saying, well, you're losing that $7,000 or you're losing that, $21,000 or whatever? What's the difference?
Okay, so I'm going to let her answer, but let me just maybe preface it. Is what's happened with her situation and what happened with everyone's situation are two things. One, the access to capital and being an honest banker. That's what makes it all work, because most people are enslaved by credit card companies and debt. I always tell people she has enslaved them because they don't get interest payments from her. They only get their money from the payment they get from whatever she buys. She used to use cash or debit cards for everything because her husband was sick. She had to work and she didn't have money and she didn't want to have, credit problems. So that's all she did. She had no debt, but she had no money. The same thing was going to happen when she sold her house. She'd have no mortgage, but she had no money. So her life experience was the thing that I think made her search for something better. Because today we laugh and kid. I did for her things that I don't usually do for people because she's thrifty. So I did a 7-year term policy. I never do that. To this day, she punches me. Why didn't you do a 15? Because now she understands the benefits. The 7 is causing her to now need another. It's like this. I have a property. I have a business right on this corner. It's great, but I can't expand it. But I'm not going to close it. I need to get another business. That's where she's at. So
yeah, no. And when I talk about losing it, of course you're getting something for it, but because I'm putting the money into my policy, into the paid up additions part, the cash value side, and because I'm not ever taking, when I borrow money, when I get a loan from the insurance company, because I'm not actually taking my money out and spending it like I would if it was in a savings account or in the bank or my checking account or any place else. I'm collateralizing it. So there's a cost. I'm paying a small, simple interest percentage to the insurance company, but it's simple. It's not the compound interest that the credit cards gouge you with that you can never climb your way out. So by me collateralizing my money, and my money's always sitting there, and it's always earning. It's going to continue to earn the interest and get the dividend from that because it doesn't go away. And then when I get the insurance company's money, I pay my bills, but then I pay back the insurance company. So my money's still there. Now I can borrow it all over again because, most people understand the concept of collateralizing. So if you have, $100,000, bank will let you borrow close to $100,000, but not all of it. You're not going to take out. They don't want it to, close the account. So you're going to, borrow a good percentage of it against it. But if you do it in a bank, it's your money and it's gone. But I do it here, it's their money. My money's still there. So now I pay it back, and guess what? It creeps up again, and I can borrow it right back out again. And so it's just that circle. And it just works beautifully for me, the way I do it. But and I try to help people with it, and it's hard to wrap your head around sometimes. It's really only one extra step, which, because you still need your commercial bank. We're not telling anybody you get rid of your commercial bank. You still have to have a place to park your money for it to pass through so that you can put it into the policy, and a place for it to go when you want to take a loan against it. But the only thing is, just remember to take it out of the bank and put it into the policy first, and give yourself, it's a little, just got to think, give yourself a little bit of time so that you have the money and time to pay your bills. So it's really, and it's just, we've been all conditioned. I did it to my kids, and, the same way I always knew, but I am blessed now because both of them have policies. My one daughter just got a second one, and they use it exactly how I feel they should, but it doesn't matter how I feel. They use it how it works for them. So, and that's how I feel they should. I feel they should do it how it works for them. And it doesn't necessarily mean my way's the only way or the best way. It's definitely not. We all find our niche.
I love all that. I realize now I could have and should have asked that one question better, but I love, and I'll just underscore that one thing you said about we're really just asking people to consider adding one step to what they're already doing. Everybody's already banking, but you could add one step to what you're already doing and then retain the power of your earnings for the rest of your life instead of it evaporating with that $7,000 purchase here or the $20,000 purchase here or the 17-cent banana over here or whatever it happens to be. You could retain the power of the dollars that you earn. I love that. So if you had particular help from this video, we've got a whole playlist in this category. So make sure to take the deep dive in that playlist. Live and leave a lasting legacy.